I'm so thrilled and honored to have been invited to talk with you all today here at the Clinton Library. But first, I wanted to recognize all of you. And I want to remind you that you are all philanthropists, because the roots of the word philanthropist actually have nothing to do with money. Philo and anthro means love and human. Philanthropy is really about the love for humanity. So when you give of yourself for the love of human beings, you are indeed a philanthropist. And in my experience in the philanthropic arena, putting human beings at the center of the work cannot be emphasized or stressed enough, actually. So allow me to illustrate this with a little story. Once upon a time, an African girl was overseeing her herd of animals in a remote field in rural Africa, when suddenly a brand new white four-wheel drive truck advanced out of a dust cloud towards her. The driver, a young MBA American woman in business attire, leans out the window and hands the girl very confidently a printed note in the language of the girl's district. And the note said, "If I tell you exactly how many cows and calves you have in your herd, will you give me a calf that I can take back with me for research?" So the girl looks at the woman, then looks back at her peacefully grazing herd and calmly nods, "And okay, I guess so." So the slick Western woman parks her car, whips out her Dell notebook computer, connects it to her singular Razor V3 cell phone, and surfs to a NASA page on the internet where she calls up a GPS satellite to get an exact fix on her location, which she then feeds to another NASA satellite that scans the area in an ultra-high resolution photo. She then opens the digital photo in Adobe Photoshop and exports it to an image processing center in Hamburg, Germany. Within seconds, she receives an email on her Palm Pilot that the image has been processed and the data stored. She then accesses the MS SQL database through an ODBC connected Excel spreadsheet with email on her iPhone, and after a few minutes, receives a response. And on her high-tech miniaturized solar HP LaserJet printer, she prints out a full-color 150-page report. And finally turns to this girl who's been standing there all along and says to her, looking into a voice-activated translation device that she's placed between them, "You have exactly 1,586 cows." In a fraction of a second, the translation device tells the girl precisely the number of cattle she has. The girl looks at this woman, a look of surprise from the whole thing, as you can imagine, and realizes, according to her note, she will now be taking one of her animals. She watches this woman wander off and select one of them, and now she's actually a little amused as she watches the woman with the white truck stuff it into the trunk of the vehicle. So then the girl says to the woman, through the device of course, realizing that it might just work both ways, "So if I can tell you exactly what your business is, will you give me back my animal?" The woman considers what she sees standing before her and her unanticipated proposition for a second, and then she says back to the girl, "Okay then, why not?" So the girl now takes her turn through the device. "You are a consultant for a large Western-based development organization." "How did you guess that?" she says. "No guessing required," the girl answered. "You showed up here with a solution to a problem I don't think I have. You haven't asked me a thing about who I am or what I need. You relied on technology, not me. You wanted payment for an answer I already knew to a question I never asked. And you tried to show me how much smarter than me you are, and you don't know a thing about cattle. This is a herd of sheep. Now give me back my dog." So this little story is about remembering that smart is something more than our good intentions. It's not how trained, educated, or technically savvy we may be, or how much data we can gather. And I think it's really important to stress that smart is actually how we meet the world, how well we are able to listen and not make assumptions, understand and respect the intricacy of relationships and systems, and the interrelatedness and the connectedness of life. Do we value being open and learning from the people we seek to serve? Do we involve them? Or are they the objects that we affect? We all live in very unique environments, cultures, and circumstances. And I've learned that showing up without all of the answers ahead of time is really important and actually really gets you somewhere. Or we may just miss the point entirely and produce unhelpful, or even in some cases, very negative, unintended consequences. So I wanted to share with you today a little bit about the genesis of the NoVo Foundation, what we've decided to focus on, and how we arrived there, and also talk about the underlying vision, philosophy, and the values at the core of our foundation. So one of the reasons that my father-in-law, investor Warren Buffett, is so unique and has been so successful, as many of you know, is that his investment philosophy has been to invest for the long term in logical and practical ways, but not always in ways that are popular on Wall Street. He looks for managers who embody qualities that he trusts, who deeply care about their businesses, invest back into them, and as he has said many times, would probably work for free because they're so passionate about what they do. So he looks for things that he understands, that have practical applications in everyday people's lives. And he looks for what he calls undervalued assets. So why am I mentioning this? Well, this idea of looking for undervalued assets as solutions, places where tremendous value is held but not necessarily recognized, has had a powerful influence on what his son Peter and I have chosen to focus on philanthropically. So the undervalued assets that we've chosen to invest in are twofold. I believe that we are the largest private foundation, defining our focus to be the empowerment of girls and women worldwide as the answers for positive, sustainable global change in the areas that philanthropy often addresses: health, poverty, education, peace, social justice, things like this. And to work in ways that balance and affirm feminine values. And I will explain to you what I mean by this in a few minutes. And we will invest for the long term in what we hope will result in a shift, a deep systemic change towards balance and partnership, thereby healing the world. So for us, this all started with what we call the Big Bang. In the spring of 2006, I was walking through Bryant Park in Manhattan, and I answered my cell phone. My husband Peter said, "We got a fax from your father. You got to come home. I think our lives just changed." So 2 months later, we found ourselves in the New York Public Library for an announcement, and history was being made that day. My mother-in-law, Susie Buffett, had unexpectedly passed 2 years earlier in 2004, and I think that this influenced Warren's decision, as they assumed in their youth that Susie would live longer than he and give away his fortune. In 2006, 3 Buffett children's foundations were awarded billion-dollar pledges. A large sum went to his late wife Susie's foundation, and $30 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Of course, these foundations all have their distinct foci and stories, and today you'll hear a little bit of ours. Get into the mind of the philanthropist a little. So did you ever play the game Genie, as in genie in a bottle, when you were little? Well, I remember trying to come up with 3 really good wishes. Well, this kind of felt like that, but it wasn't a game. We suddenly had the responsibility to steward tens of millions of dollars a year and try and make a difference. So what would you choose to do? How would you organize figuring it out? Who and on what would you place your bets, and how, where, and why? So a lot of big questions went through our minds, as you can imagine. But luckily, we'd learned the basics of philanthropy over a 10-year period prior. I had worked with and for nonprofits, and we were in our 30s and 40s and not so green. And our intentions were deep and real, to do all that we could to honor this opportunity we were given for the betterment of the world in some way, and to do this well. We gave an interview with the New York Times shortly after the announcement, and the reporter asked, "So what things will you fund? Health, water, education, and so forth?" And we thought, how does one try and decide which of these is more important than another? We cared about all of them. And once you take care of one thing, aren't all the other things on that list waiting to be addressed just as urgently? So we thought, maybe this is the wrong question. So we went into learning mode and we told the world to wait. We needed to take some time. So we traveled a lot, we observed, we listened, we met with dozens of thought leaders. We stepped back and we looked for patterns, consistencies, and themes, because we wanted to have an understanding of the time that we live in the context of history. What thinking has been at work over time? What are the stories and the programs that rule the world? And what is not working and why? So we really wanted to be conscious about all of this. How would we approach and support work in the world? Decide what was best for us to fund, and identify all of our assets, not just the money. What role would we play, and did it matter who we were in all of this anyway? But we knew we wanted a mission we could live with and deeply connect to and believe in for the lifetime of our foundation. So the only guideline my father-in-law gave us was to try and fund where few people were, and to try and work on one or two underinvested but ripe with opportunity ideas. So he said, stick with what you invest in and really understand why and how the investments you're making can make a difference. Good advice. So through our process, we did discover an opportunity and a painfully undervalued asset. She only looks slightly different in different places. Did you know that only half a penny of every dollar spent in the developing world makes it directly to an adolescent girl? Half of 1% maybe. She's basically invisible. She's not a priority of NGOs or government budgets. Girls by the millions are married off as children, taken out of school, isolated in their husband's home doing domestic chores. And it isn't safe for them to be out anyway. So in their poverty, and because of lack of skills, support, and education, they are stuck, having to fetch wood and water. They're vulnerable to rape, and their bodies are overburdened. The leading cause of death in the developing world is childbirth, because girls are too small to bear children. So at first we thought we found a magic bullet. We'll fund girls' education. But soon we found out it's not as easy as that. We learned that 1 in 3 girls and women worldwide suffer and will suffer from sexual abuse and violence in their lifetime. Common, for example, in Africa, by male teachers at school in exchange for grades. So school becomes an unsafe place for girls for many reasons. Keeping girls in secondary school is a major conundrum. What job could a girl get anyway, even if there was money to keep her in school? Yet she is, and this is undeniable, the mother of every girl and boy child that will be born. She is the lifeblood, the way in, the conduit, and the hope for the next generation. However, if she is suffering and poor, what does she have to offer her children, boys or girls, let alone her community or her nation? And there are 600 million adolescent girls in the developing world whose futures are uncertain. So will their children be born in lack or prosperity? And is there anything we can do about it? So here in the US, we saw this picture. The violence happens to girls oftentimes by someone in her family or someone that she knows. If she's poor and has suffered abuse at home, she tries to escape and easily ends up in the juvenile justice system, having been prostituted by pimps who take advantage of her vulnerability. Yet she is criminalized while the men who buy and sell her body and profit from it go free. Systems in place keep these girls in a vicious cycle and blames them, affirming that a poor girl who has been abused and abandoned is worth nothing. Feminist lawyer and scholar Catherine McKinnon says that if prostitution is a choice, then why are girls and women who have no choices always choosing it? These girls and women are not only left out of economic and social systems that don't work for them, they've become goods and services. They've become commodities in billion-dollar criminal industries. In the US, India, Eastern Europe, Africa, China. So there is a need, certainly, to educate girls, but there's also a need to change cultural and societal attitudes of tolerance and economic and social systems of domination and exploitation that keep women and girls down. But I really think we can change this picture. I met a girl in rural Bangladesh a couple of years ago named Naina. And in a program designed specifically for adolescent girls, she was given a safe space to learn basic hygiene, financial literacy, and life skills. She had a mentor and was given time and a place to play sports and to dance and learn with other girls. And she was supported with a small loan to start a vegetable garden and raise some chickens. She hadn't been going to school because her family didn't have enough money, but now she was able to sell her eggs and her vegetables and was attending school. And she told me not only that, but she was paying for her younger brother's school fees, and she was supporting all of the extras around the house, which meant anything other than food. So I asked her if her parents made her do these things, and she vehemently said no. She wanted to do these things for her family. I asked her about her father. She said she had not had any kind of relationship or interaction with him until now, that she's bringing resources to the family. So they're talking now, they were getting to know one another, and he respects her, she said. His and her brother's idea of her as a girl and her worth had changed forever. And Naina told me she wants to become a doctor. So you multiply this story by thousands of girls in the developing world, and you are seeing GDPs of countries changing, societal attitudes and cultures shifting. And I don't see why similar supports wouldn't help a girl in Little Rock or New York become so much more than she would otherwise. So according to studies, girls in the developing world invest 90% of what they earn back into their families and communities. So if girls and women are empowered and prioritized, HIV and AIDS rates go down, theirs and their families' health improves, they have less children and their children are more educated, the environment improves, there are positive climate change and social implications, and countless other benefits. So see what I mean about undervalued assets? However, the reality is that girls and women face enormous obstacles. Worldwide, they're denied their rights, they're barred from accessing resources, denied educational opportunities. And if there are laws to protect them, they're not enforced. They're not able to own property or inherit land. They are discriminated against by and large. Unfairly, they own less than 1% of the world's land, but work hard on it to produce 50% of the world's food. Women are the unacknowledged drivers of economies, and the world squeezes the life out of women and withholds from them to the max. And Peter and I found this stunning and unacceptable. So this is why we've chosen to work on behalf of girls and women, and to be a part of changing this reality. But there's much work to be done. So how did this happen? We explored this question a lot. The stories at work in the world, years of gender inequality, domination, empire building, rampant competition, and exploitation, the so-called masculine energies running wild. And although so many men have paid a price in war and from exploitation, women and girls especially have paid an enormous price. So our vision statement became, we see the world out of balance, and we seek a shift, moving it away from entrenched systems of domination and exploitation towards systems based on partnership and collaboration in all spheres of life. Power with, not power over, with girls and women as primary agents of change. And this became our guiding star. We came to the conclusion that we must invest not only in girls and women, but in improving the gender dynamics, social environments, attitudes, and behaviors in relationships that are expressed by both females and males. I think of it as using a different toolbox. A toolbox with human interventions that produces great results. Dare I say a feminine toolbox? Okay, first then, if there's a feminine toolbox, what's a masculine toolbox? Fairly safe to say that our present society operates mostly out of a masculine toolbox that's been learned and reinforced over time. Folks, we've inherited it. Force and forcefulness, hierarchy, colonialism, mechanistic, punitive, and competitive structures, these are valued, dominant, and actually encouraged. Just look around you. We spent $52 billion on nuclear weapons research last year, but only $2 billion on childcare. And these inequities in values are everywhere. And I think the masculine toolbox actually normalizes them. And we're desensitized. We've succumbed. And after so long, we just don't know what to do about it anymore. So I see a lot of us, myself included, running into feelings of impasse, feelings of limitation, quite honestly. We're running up too steep a hill, fighting against forces that are too big, too powerful, and too rich. And so the image I see in my mind when I think about this is a big ship. And on the side of the ship, I see the word empire. And this ship is racing through dark, turbulent, cold waters, going after, I'm not sure what, just more. And there's a small group of powerful men on the bow of this ship, commanding it, and they've been driving it in a fierce and conquering way in this one direction for about 2,000 years now. And the men on the bow of the ship have actually gone blind and deaf. They're just compelled to move the ship forward faster and faster. But as I watch this, I wonder, to where are they sailing and why? And then I see the women, and guess where they are? They're not even in the ship. They are in the water, holding on for dear life, putting fingers and hands and feet and whatever they can in what appears to be gaping holes. They are trying desperately to get the attention of the men up above, but their voices are too quiet. They are too busy gulping mouthfuls of water, trying to catch their breath. They are pleading with the men up above to somehow convey to them, this ship is going to sink, and we are all going to drown if you don't do something. But the women are divided by cold rain and big waves, and they're trying desperately to hold on to the children. With enormous strength and resolve, they work with what they've got. So the women continue to plug holes, and some good men are even down there with them. But the men up above don't look down because they're moving too fast. Their blind ambition is too fierce, and the steering wheel has been in this one position so long that it's stuck. And besides, they're above the water. They don't consider that the women are also passengers, very vulnerable and affected, even though there are 52% of women below as there are men. So, if this is us, don't we somehow need to get out of that water beneath the boat? Not let go and drown in the sea, but get on top of the boat. Be seen, be heard, dry off, slow the boat down, grab the steering wheel and make it move again, change its course. And better yet, take the ship to land and get everyone off of it. So in my mind's eye, I see the letters on the side of the ship now that were up on deck, and they spell Earth Community, not Empire. And I see a welcoming dry beach and green land ahead, in the distance getting closer, and I feel a sense of hope. So if we can get our boat there, what would we create, guys and gals? What could life be centered around? Would we love this new land and cherish it, nurture it for future generations? Or would we just make more of what we've known and maybe even get back on the old, fast-moving ship? Inevitably return back to how things have been. So again, this helps me to experience what I think we are experiencing, and as well as the possibilities. And I hope we can keep the image of the green shores in our minds and remember that our sisters and our brothers, countless numbers of them, need us desperately to help them get out of the water and get us all to a place we can create anew and proudly leave to our children and to future generations. Okay, so then, if we had a feminine toolbox, what would be in that? And I honestly kid you not, when we were first thinking about this idea of masculine and feminine principles, femininity I knew, but feminine values? I found that in the feminine toolbox you find things like nurturing, listening, co-creating, and collaboration, models based in abundance, organic processes allowing for space so that natural wisdom and collective wisdom can come forth, a sense of connectedness, beauty, experiential learning, cooperation. I read somewhere that the sacred feminine is also the irresistible power that destroys old forms and brings new ones into being. And we found this really exciting. NoVo, my husband found the word, is actually Latin for to change, alter, or invent. And as it turns out, the V, which we capitalized kind of unconsciously because it looks kind of neat, it's a symbol actually for the feminine and the masculine in balance together. So there is power in a name, isn't there? So we agreed that we wanted to work with human beings, always at the center, and inspire new thinking around balance and systems that would truly work for people, not just a few, and the planet, and that would result in a ripple effect of change. I want to be clear on something. Women does not equal the feminine principles any more than men equals the masculine. But what if a balance of these two could be fostered in people, blending toolboxes, as it were? I recently visited a high school on the Lower East Side of Manhattan where the average age was 19 or 20. It was primarily male, African American, and Hispanic. This school was their last chance. They'd all been expelled 5 or 6 times from other high schools. Most likely these kids were headed for jail. I was told about them before I went in. Then I was told something else quite stunning. They were all college-bound, making their own textbooks. They had something called morning meetings where they shared how they were feeling and the challenges they were facing. One boy said, "I'm Jose and I'm a father." Immediately another boy said, "And he's a good father too. He really loves his son." Other students chimed in with similar remarks. The absentee rate at the school was extremely low. The school was based on inquiry and participatory learning, not rote, passive learning. The kids were preparing to welcome a Rwandan guest they'd invited themselves. to teach them about the Rwandan genocide and about compassion. What? This school had been designed on exactly the opposite of what education policymakers are purporting these days. The masculine toolbox. There was no emphasis on standardized test, punishment, or expulsion. This school was based on involving and nurturing kids and focusing on their whole selves, their social and emotional realities and well-being, developing their compassion and their empathy through sharing and focused attention. They made agreements together, and they set boundaries. They considered meaning and relationships. These boys, they told me, felt seen and heard and safe, and they wanted to come to school. And you know what? Academics improved. So lastly, I wanted to share with you one more important thing about NoVo and my own personal evolution and role as a woman in this work. And this answers a little bit of my earlier question, does it matter who we are in this? So all women in this room are former girls, and maybe even recovering former girls. And I will confess to you that my former girl was the classic, pleasing, voiceless, deferring to others, not believing in her worth or putting herself first, good girl to a T. And had I not confronted her and all of the programming she bought into and held on to keep her safe, well, I had my dark night of the soul. I came to a crossroads and I died to her. And it was a death, crisis, grief, and all. But by being forced to confront myself, I believe that I resurrected someone new. And I tell you, without this, without my own personal rock bottom and doing my work to transform, I would not be up here talking to you today, or doing the work I do to support and empower girls and women, or any of the things I've been describing to you today. I'm kind of a living gender experiment. My good girl was born second to a twin brother who was encouraged pretty much always to be first. And this played out throughout my life. Before the Big Bang in 2006, I was working days and nights on a very big project that my music producer husband reminded me was his, not mine. My place in our marriage, although we never consciously agreed to this, was to support him. Regardless of the work I was doing, long, dedicated hours, you get the picture, all of what we were doing was his. And I remember actually thinking, well, it's all right if I'm completely invisible. Look how good and unselfish I am, and I love him. I really would have given the last drop of blood from my body to show him how good I was. I told staff, actually, that came to me for guidance, sorry, I have no power. I have no say in this. So it was the day after my 37th birthday, and I had been saying I had no voice. Well, I woke up and my voice was gone. I could not whisper or eke out a sound. And I lay alone in my small sublet New York apartment, quite ill actually, and my husband was on tour and away with the project that he was working on. And frankly, my exhaustion and my depletion pinned me to the bed for several days. And in a feverish haze, I kept hearing a voice inside my head say, "You, Jennifer, you gave away your voice. You see? You stuffed your feelings and your power, and you have been silencing your truth from what you know for so long, from your father, from your brother, your mate, at school, from society, and from yourself." And from what I consider the gift of this illness, I got the message and I listened. And I realized that I had been a culprit in this covering up of my truth and what I knew. And you know what? I changed. I stopped. And I've never been the same. So my voice came back, and I started to use it, to strengthen it. Because I realized that not only was my life at stake, but all of the values and things that I knew were right and good and that worked were at stake. And if I could not give voice to what I valued, these things could not live through me. My voice was not just my own. So I got busy building myself back up again, and I gave myself a voice. I took credit that was rightfully mine, and my husband and I became partners. And I very much believe that if we are not whole and balanced, how can we say we want to bring balance to the world? I also changed this. I used to have my own personal metaphorical hiding box, I call it. And it's where I used to put all of the things that I held dear, but I felt I needed to hide and protect. Things like how important nature and beauty was to me, the pain I felt when someone cut down an old tree or hurt an animal, how vulnerable I truly felt, and how I craved just simply to be seen, nurtured, and loved. I hid aspects of myself so that no one could see them, take them away, or destroy them, or destroy me. And in the box, I put my dreams of how I thought the world could be. I did not consider that these things were actually sources of possibility, potential, and strength. So I ask all of you, if you have not, to let that which is most precious inside of you to come into full light. Your work and your life will be better for it, I promise. So if you have a personal hiding box of your own that you've stuffed parts of your humanness and your vulnerability away in, I give you permission, and for the love of human beings, I ask you to open it. I believe that the feminine wants to move into our conscious awareness now, in men as well as in women. But for her, we need to create space. She has been repressed for so long. Like the girls and the women of the world, she has not been affirmed, valued, or listened to. But we can bring her energy to the forefront of our lives every day, assist her and work with her. And she looks for us to do this because remember, we are her voice, her hands, her toolbox. And I think, to be honest, our survival as a human family depends on this. So I would like to leave you with one final thought, and it's an invitation, really. And I thank you so much for listening and being here with me today. The moment a woman comes home to herself, the moment she knows that she has become a person of influence, an artist of her life, a sculptor of her universe, a person with rights and responsibilities who is respected and respects herself and her deepest knowing, the resurrection of the world begins. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Jennifer. We do have time for some questions. If you raise your hand, we will get a microphone to you. Esther, we'll start with you.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for what you have done with the Girl Effect. You said that when a girl has everything that she needs, she invests 90% back to her community. I want to say that I am that girl. I am from Kenya, and in the year 2006, I was here in Little Rock, and in my community, the British Broadcasting Corporation had gone there because girls were dying because they were going through female genital mutilation. And so I took up that, and I'm giving back to my community. And as I'm speaking right now, we are rescuing hundreds of girls from self-mutilation. So what she said is not just a fact, but it's our reality today. So I run an organization called Women of Paradise, and the question I have for you, Jennifer, is I would like for you to tell the people in the developed world why it's important for them to help people and women in developing countries. Sometimes some people just think, oh, somebody else will do it, but when the boat is leaking, one day we're all going to be drowning.
Exactly. I think you said it. I mean, we're all connected, right? We're all connected. And what we do in America and in the developed world, I mean, frankly, we're doing business in every corner of the world. So we have a tremendous effect on what happens in other regions of the world. And our economies and our ecosystems and all these things are linked. So I just look at it as a global world. We fund domestically and we fund abroad and around the world. And I just think we live in a global world and it all is connected. So why help? Because we can and we can make a difference, but it's in how we show up to the world and help, I think, is really key. I also think, and really find in my work, we've done a lot of work in the developing world, and it's sort of a mirror for the US. We have a lot of the same issues here, a lot of the same issues. I just spoke in Milwaukee, where I'm from, and we're 4th worst in maternal mortality. And it's just alarming people. We didn't know, or Milwaukeeans didn't know in our own backyard, the problems are very similar. So I'm finding almost that the developing world context is becoming a mirror, and then we're waking up and realizing we have these problems, same problems here, and we've got to do something about it here just as urgently. Thank you for the work you're doing, by the way. Thank you.
Mother?
I want to thank you for a beautiful and moving presentation, and very personal. If one is doing some kind of work that's compatible with your goal, how does one actually submit a proposal? What are the procedures, and what kinds of things are you supporting?
Well, we work a little bit differently. The Nike Foundation actually administers our partnership on the Girl Effect. So if you go to the Nike Foundation website, you can get information about that there. But we really saw that the whole field of this thinking, which this Girl Effect video really frames up really well, is so new and nascent. There isn't enough quality work, enough research and things like that. So what we're trying to do is really work on big systems level to sort of build this field and bring other donors in and bring lots of ways that you can take whatever is right for you to support. Global giving is also one of the well, this is more on the funding side. Global Giving is one of our partnerships. We've got lots of partnerships. We don't directly fund a lot of programs. The Nike Foundation is doing a lot of that for us, but we're trying to build the pots of money and the government money and things like that. So it's a little bit indirectly answering your question, because I can't just say, give me a grant request and I'll take it back to the office and then this is our procedure, because it's not quite how we work. But thank you.
Anyone else?
Erin. In the balcony.
Hold on, Erin.
Thank you so much. I second what she said. It was a beautiful and motivating speech that you gave. My question is, you touched on how there are systems that are oppressing women, and you talked about, even in the United States, with teenage runaways and prostitution and laws that keep them down. I think a lot of times people don't think about the oppression, the systemic oppression in the U.S. against women. I'm curious if you could highlight some other areas besides, prostitution laws that you think are the most pressing?
Oh boy. I think there's a lot in terms of how we're portrayed in the media. I think it's such a narrow sliver. We've been commodified in media, and I think so dumbed down. So I think that media is one of the most incredible tools and influencers in our society and in the world, right? And so I see that as actually quite oppressive. And there is no women-owned like channel or big distribution media system, and so I think, and the systems that the people that control those big medias are very masculine. I think it plays out in healthcare. I mean, I think contraception should be free. It's very expensive, and it should be free. Is this true that Viagra is covered by insurance? I mean, really? Even my own, I was telling somebody earlier, my own story, just think about how it shows up everywhere. I mean, our work-life family law policy, we haven't really enforced Title IX, which is equal right to play and equal rights in college and all. There's a lot to that. We're working on that at NoVo. This is not fair or level. Work-life family values. So if you're a mother and you need to go pick up your son from daycare because he's sick, it is really likely you could lose your job. Women are promoted in law firms because they might be having babies. I mean, these things sort of sound like the things maybe my mother's generation dealt with. We're still really dealing with this stuff. We're not being paid equally. It's 75 cents to the dollar, 6 cents or something. So the inequities really, I think when you start peeling away the layers of the onion, are still showing up. My father, there were 2 girls in my family, 2 boys, and my parents divorced right when I was going to college. My dad said, I'll take the boys, your mom can take the girls. I said, but Dad, I want to go to college. And he said, well, you're going to be your husband's responsibility. Why should I pay for an education for you? So you see it in these micro family way. He's come around. But I showed him. Anyway, yeah, so I think you see it. There's lots of other examples. Is that helpful? Great.
Right over here.
I'm going to let Nicolai.
Secretary Clinton has made empowerment of women a focal point of the Obama administration foreign policy. What are your thoughts on that, first of all, and then what are some ways that your foundation is partnering with this initiative?
We're not formally partnering with her. I think she's an amazing champion on this issue and has been for such a long time, and it's so important. I mean, I think it takes so many changes on so many levels, in the family, like I was sort of intonating on, and cultural and whatnot. So I think her leadership on this is fantastic, but she needs as many voices and men like you, seriously, men's leadership to be behind her as well, and to think about how actually that plays out in gender equity. What does that look like? So we're not formally involved, but I'm certainly aware of her work and really greatly respect it, and really feel like these sort of public-private partnerships are the way on all sectors where we really move things. We got to move this big ship around. So
We have time for one more, right in the back.
I love that there are men here. Thank you.
And my question is about men's involvement in this. My name is Nathaniel Owen. I'm a Clinton School student here, and I want to thank you for being here. It was in the 90s when then First Lady Clinton was in Beijing, and she made the statement, women's rights cannot be talked about as separate from human rights.
Right.
I'm curious, what kind of programming or initiatives does your organization support, and what types of initiatives do you think should be supported to bring, for lack of a better phrase, bring men around and realize, these are not separate issues. Women's rights are not just for women. Thank you.
It's such a great question. It's absolutely right. We're going to do this if both genders get it. Lots of things. We're doing things like, I'll give you just examples. In this country, there's a group called A Call to Men, and there's a couple of extremely charismatic leaders that go out. They work with the NFL, they work in high schools and colleges, the military, and they're role models. I mean, they're just like great athletes themselves and all that. And they talk about something called the man box, and about how men are very socialized to be tough, and you don't want to throw like a girl, and to sort of dominate women. It's so cool to trick them into sex and date rape and all this stuff. And they are really starting these grassroots conversations to say that's not real masculinity. And men and boys have to believe it, but they're opening up sort of a relief in a way for a lot of these guys who said, well, it's so much pressure to walk around and be so tough all the time and not be able to be vulnerable and express myself in certain ways or be artistic or like something that isn't manly in the man box. So we do a lot of work with groups like that and overseas as well, where men are very much on the community level. I just visited one in Uganda, who are role models in their community, going out and talking about how to have a better relationship with your spouse or your girlfriend with this sort of gender equity sort of new frame, although it's not explicit, so that guys have a better relationship. I was sitting with some guys in a Mumbai slum a couple years ago, and they were like the district's bad guys, and they were in this program because they'd been harassing the girls just relentlessly, and they said, we just were doing what we saw. We wanted to get dates, and this is what we saw, and they didn't realize it was harassment, and they were learning whole new ways. And then they said, we got to widen the circle and grow the circle. So that kind of stuff is absolutely key. Thank you for a great question.
Let's thank Jennifer one more time for that presentation.